I was told that using boku as a first-person pronoun makes the sentence sound like a little boy said it. Is this true? It's not true. If this was true, it would mean Americans are paying $700 million to somebody who apparently doesn't know how to pick the correct Japanese pronoun.
思いますね。僕も初めての、挑戦でしたし。
So even though the Boku Little Boy Association kind of exists, Boku is much more than that. Let me explain. So there are two common masculine first-person pronouns in standard Japanese. Boku and ore. You can use them like それ、僕のスマホ That's my smartphone. Or それ、俺のスマホ That's my smartphone. The difference is ore sounds more masculine, rough, and informal, and boku doesn't sound rough, somewhat less masculine, and also not as informal. So when it comes to pronouns like this, a lot of people conflate facts with opinions. So let's just start with facts. The fact is, a very large percentage of Japanese men use boku in many situations, even though they don't necessarily exclusively use boku.
でも正直僕もそんなに法制の知識ってすごくあるわけじゃないんで。
でも僕は服から聞こえる声しか聞きませんから。
ホリエモンが僕の財務省解体の動画について。
で、それをね、僕どうしたらいいんだろうって思っていました。
At the same time, ore is also incredibly common.
俺ほんと忖度ないからね。
やっぱ俺は肉だな。
俺はすごいイライラする。
俺とマサイとりあえずマッチは食うだ。
Now, people can have opinions about pronouns. Just like some people have the opinion that Solo Leveling is the best anime, which is obviously an incorrect opinion, but they are entitled to their opinion. So if somebody says, well, boku doesn't sound masculine enough to me, that's just their opinion. But that doesn't change the fact that boku is a very widely used pronoun amongst adults. Now, check out this comment. But many Japanese people will tell you boku is exclusively for small boys. Really? Many Japanese people, did they learn their own language from shonen anime? But apparently by many Japanese people, this guy meant one person. I must admit, I've only heard that one from a single person. But native speakers being wrong about their own language happens a lot because we learn our language implicitly without consciously analyzing it. It's like how you can still get home while your brain is busy thinking about when Jinshi is finally going to whip out his frog. You get home just fine, but if I ask you to describe every single cue that you used to find your way home, you probably can't do it. You were like, what was the color of the house at the corner? Do I make a left turn at the second intersection or the third intersection? You can't always consciously articulate it. Languages are like that. Most of our knowledge is implicit, and you're not always consciously aware of how exactly you speak the language. So you have to be careful if you ask a random Japanese person about Japanese. And that's why people sometimes teach you something that they will never say in real life, because they are not aware of what they say exactly. So if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you natural native Japanese based on what different native speakers say in real life, because I analyze transcriptions of real-life conversations so that I won't have to solely rely on my intuition. Click the link on the description and subscribe to my email group. Another kind of a misconception I sometimes come across is that you have to choose either ore or boku and stick with it. But no, pronouns are not like a harem anime where you have to pick one person at the end. You can switch pronouns depending on the situation and your mood. No 2-hour movie required to reveal your choice. Do you remember that ore is more informal than boku? Many guys who use ore with their friends in casual situations also use boku in a more formal situation like a job interview or giving a speech. Compare these sentences. 後藤さんは俺の友達です。後藤さん is my friend, which is not true because she doesn't have any friends. But this sentence is a little more informal than 後藤さんは僕の友達です。後藤さん is my friend, using boku. In situations like job interviews, especially for corporate jobs, I wouldn't recommend using ore. Unless your main character energy is so strong that your job interview turns into an anime episode.
力を貸してくださいよ。この腰抜けどもめ、いいから黙って全部俺に投資しろ。
And this is where watashi comes into play, because watashi is even more formal than boku. So if you want to sound more formal, you can say 後藤さんは私の友人です。後藤さん is my friend. Did you notice I used the word 友人 instead of 友達? Yujin is more formal than tomodachi, even though they both mean friends. By the way, when you talk to your classmates in plain Japanese, you wouldn't use watashi if you're a guy. This pretty much only happens in anime, which will be quite weird in real life. And using watashi in plain Japanese without using des or mas is typically considered feminine. So, 後藤さんは私の友達だよ. 後藤さん is my friend. This is typically feminine Japanese. I say typically though because I've had one colleague who actually used watashi in plain Japanese at work. So there are exceptions. But if you're reading a novel and a character uses watashi in plain Japanese, it usually means she's a girl. Now, let me show you an example of how people use different pronouns. Here, he's talking to his friends, and he's using ore. But in the next clip,
当時、セカンダリの編集を主に担当していたのが僕だったので、僕が引き受けることになりました。
This is an apology video, and he's using boku. Another clip.
この動画では、私、フィッシャーズのシルクロードから。
This is yet another apology video from a different member. It's actually not really a serious apology video, but here he's using watakushi, which is even more formal than watashi. So some people use watakushi in a very serious or formal situation. Now you can see that the choice of using boku or ore is not always about masculinity. It can be situational. My question is, when talking with someone, do you stick to one for that person? Or do you also change it up throughout the conversation? And that is a very good question. Generally speaking, if you use either boku or ore with one person, you stick with it. But there are exceptions. So this is Azuma Hiroki, a Japanese philosopher who writes interesting thought-provoking books that are easy to read. And in this live stream, he uses boku in the beginning.
なんかやっぱり僕テーマパーク好きだから遊園地好きだから。
But check this out.
まずそこでしょと。俺ほんとそう思ってるよ。俺はこの件ちょっと熱くなりすぎたけど。
Now later on, when he gets a bit emotional, he starts using ore. So it can be pretty flexible. I'm gonna show you another clip of a same person.
弱いつながりという本は僕は今まで長い間批評家というか。
And this is a pretty formal situation. It's like an award-winning speech. Some people might use watashi in this situation, but he uses boku, which is also fine. I would say if you use boku in a formal situation, you come across as a friendly and more approachable person. So it could be your personal choice. It's a bit like fashion. It's personal and situational, you can even cross-dress, and you sometimes get unsolicited advice from a stranger on the internet. I heard that if you put emphasis on the ku instead of the bo, it makes it sound more mature. That's a very good question. In this video, I've been saying boku with a high-low pitch pattern, but a lot of people in natural conversation say boku with a low-high pitch pattern. So the sentence, 僕は行きません. I won't go with 僕 high-low pitch pattern can also be 僕は行きません. I won't go with 僕 low-high pitch pattern. High pitch doesn't indicate emphasis in Japanese unlike English, but that's just a technical thing. And I don't think it's true 僕 low-high sounds more mature than 僕 high-low. If anything, I think 僕 high-low simply sounds a bit more formal than 僕 low-high, which sounds more colloquial. And people can use both. Check this out.
というわけで、僕は教育がプル型になるのは実は反対なんですよね。
Here he said 僕 high-low. But in the next clip,
なんか少なくとも僕自身はあんま出たくないなと思ってて、なんか嫌になっちゃった。
Here he said 僕 low-high. So this is not necessarily the kind of situation where one person just uses one pitch pattern and sticks with it. We can use both, and I think I do too. But I have to admit that I don't have a clear, definite answer for this. This is something I've been doing completely unconsciously, so I need to do a bit more research on this. Even though I'm a native Japanese speaker who does a lot of research on Japanese, I don't know everything. I only know what I know. Now let me talk about the little boy association. Using boku in itself doesn't make you sound like a little boy, but this kind of association does exist. You can actually call a little boy boku and say, 僕アイス食べる? Do you wanna eat ice cream? And when I was a little boy, I actually hated it when somebody called me boku. I was thinking like, what? Do you think I'm a little boy? Which I was. How dare you correctly identifying my age and gender and use the correct second person pronoun? Unbelievable. I don't know how other Japanese people feel about this, but as a kid, I also didn't like when grown-ups talk to me in like a kid voice, like すごい、ひらがな読めるんだ。頭いいね。Wow, you can read hiragana. You're so smart. I did not like that. I think it's kind of like how some of you guys feel when as soon as you say something like こんにちは, Japanese people will be like, 日本語話せるの? すごい上手. Wow, you can speak Japanese. You're so 上手. Because you clearly speak Japanese like a pro. Sayaka sensei on here said that Boku gives off a good boy vibe. But it may be that some people misunderstood it as referring to literal age rather than personality. Now, because you totally didn't skip and watch this video from the beginning while paying attention, I think you already know the reason behind this good boy vibe. It's because you can use boku in relatively formal situations, while ore doesn't work like that. And it's not entirely wrong to say that boku is kind of like a good boy and ore is kind of like a bad boy. This is oversimplification. For example, ore is extremely common. A lot of guys use it. So just because you use ore, it doesn't mean people think you are a bad boy. It's very common. I spent a lot of time in Kyushu, which has a sort of Kyushu danji culture with a masculine ideal that is a little rougher than Tokyo. A lot of people I've talked to say they find Tokyo Japanese a little effete. Effete? Well, I've learned a new word, effete. But let's talk about regional differences. Different dialects can have different pronouns and preferences. For example, I've lived in Hiroshima and some guys use washi there. That's not something you'd normally hear in standard Japanese. So if some guys have different preferences in different regions, it's not surprising. But another thing is community, like your friends you always hang out with. For example, if you hang out with a lot of macho guys who use ore, you might feel the pressure to use ore too. This is your community and you want to fit in, because an ugly duckling in real life doesn't always turn into a swan. I realized that a lot of Japanese content that I consume online, most guys use boku, because I typically watch something educational like interviews, talk shows, discussions, news, or something cultural. But to make this video, I've watched other types of content, like YouTubers playing games or reality TV show, and with those types of content, most guys use ore. So the types of content or types of people you're exposed to can affect your pronoun. Misa advises men just to use ore in casual situations, partly because many women are more comfortable with it. Boku actually risks coming off as weak. Now, using ore is not bad advice, but in my opinion, this is not something you should be worried about much. And here's why. Your personality and who you are is much more important than the exact pronoun that you use, especially if you stick with common ones like boku or ore. For example, I pretty much exclusively use boku. I don't even use watashi that much. This has never been a problem in social situations like job interviews, dating, or convincing ChatGPT that I have superior intelligence. So what does it mean? But it obviously means I have so much risk that I defy the laws of the universe. But more realistically, being comfortable with the way you speak is far more important than the exact choice of pronoun. Let me tell you my story. As a native speaker, the choice of pronoun is completely unconscious for me. As a toddler, when I was too young to be aware of the hard fact of life that people are essentially alone when they die and most of us will be forgotten forever, I was speaking Japanese using boku. It was totally unconscious. And I've never thought about changing because I was comfortable with it and it fits my personality. The way I speak Japanese is relatively polite. Many of my classmates back in school actually spoke Japanese more roughly. But that wasn't who I was, and I've never felt the need to be somebody I'm not. Now I want to talk about Kyushu, which is the southern western part of Japan, because I have some observation. I realized that I get along with a lot of women from there. I think Kyushu women are actually the most well-represented group in my dating history. I'm not sure if it has to do with masculinity or anything, but it's an interesting thing to mention in the context of this conversation. But it comes back to the point that being authentic and being comfortable with the way you speak is much more important than the exact choice of pronoun. If you think boku makes you sound weak, the problem is probably not the pronoun. So here's my advice. If you already have a pronoun that you feel comfortable with, you probably don't have to change it. Don't worry about incurring the wrath of the green owl. If you don't know what to use, just use ore with your friends in casual situations and use boku in a more formal situations. And if you prefer something even more formal, use watashi. And if you're getting cancelled, use watakushi. And if that sounds too complicated, just use boku. But most importantly, if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life native Japanese speakers speak Japanese today based on data rather than rely on how I personally speak Japanese. Because textbooks and apps often teach you something that we will never say in real life in the wrong situations. So click on the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.